You're listening to CFRN, a community of believers who trade for a living. To learn more about who we are, what we do, and how we do it, call toll-free 1-866-928-3310, and we'll send you out a no-obligation information kit absolutely free. 866-928-3310. The CFRN Emini Futures Cast is now on Stitcher. Listen to us on your iPhone, Android phones, BlackBerry, and WebOS phones. Stitcher is smart radio for your phone. Find it in your app store or at Stitcher.com. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio.
Are you ready, Steve? Andy? Yeah! Bert? Well, all right, fellas. Let's go!
You're listening to CFRN, the Christian Financial Radio Network.
Today's broadcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/CFRN. Over 85,000 titles. Choose from mystery, romance, religion, science, technology, business, New York Times bestsellers, even children's books. You name it, Audible has it. With 85,000 titles to choose from, you're sure to find the perfect audiobook for yourself or to give as a gift, and it's absolutely free. Just point your browser to audibletrial.com/CFRN. That's audibletrial.com/CFRN. And become a part of the audiobook revolution by downloading your free audiobook today. audibletrial.com/CFRN.
Hey, trader, want to get rich quick? Well, good luck with that. If, on the other hand, you actually want to learn how to trade, the place to be is www.cfrn.net. Tune in Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Eastern for our daily devotional, and then spend the next 3 hours learning how it's done from professional traders who actually trade for a living. That's www.cfrn.net. Every trading day from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. CFRN, a community of believers who trade for a living.
Good afternoon, traders, and welcome back to the CFRN Emini Futures Cast. This is the daily broadcast of Indeterminate Length, where we discuss all things Emini, along with some really big ideas on the finer points of trading gold, bonds, crude, sugar, the euro, and even T-bills. Joining us today from our studios in Boston, Mr. Michael Borth. From our trading desk in Chicago, Mr. Burton Schlichter. Now, to get things started, let's go to our host and founder in Studio A, overlooking South Mountain, America's largest city park. Here's Dwayne.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. Today is Wednesday, 19th day of July, 2017. Hope you're having a great Wednesday. This is the old hump day, depending upon your zip code, time zone. You are either on the downward slide into the weekend or you're almost there. So, congratulations. Thanks for joining us. If you're returning, welcome back. If you're here for the first time, a special welcome to you. So glad to have you with us. Now, we're going to start out by taking a look at the numbers around the world. I do have a chart up of the S&P 500 Emini Futures. If you can't see the chart and you would like to see the chart and access the chat box, all you got to do, go to our homepage at cfrn.net. On the right hand side of the page, click the big microphone, click where it says watch live now, and you'll be registered through the end of the month. You'll be able to join the show for the rest of the month with one-click access. That's all it takes. The other route, go to youtube.com/CFRN, click live, and you're there. 2 options, take your pick. All right? Okay, now, S&P 500, Emini Futures. We're currently trading 2466/67, but we're going to start out with the cash markets. We'll start with the Dow. The Dow is currently up 25 points. NASDAQ is up 42. S&P 500 cash is up 9. And the Russell 2000 is up a little over 11. So all green here at home. In the commodity basket, crude oil is up 58 cents. We had inventory numbers today, trading 46.98 last. And gold down $1.60, trading 12.40 last. As we move to the Asian markets, the Nikkei is up 21 points. Shanghai is up 45. Hang Seng up 147. Now the Hang Seng, that's over half of 1%, and the Shanghai, that's 1.5%. So everything in Asia green, and as we hit Europe, color of the day, green and more green. The FTSE closed up 40 points on the session, a little over half of 1%. The DAX closed up 21 points, and the CAC closed up 43 points. That's almost 1%. So this is some of the biggest moving and shaking we've seen in some time. The NASDAQ's up over half of 1%. The Russell 2000 up a little over 3/4 of 1%. But everywhere you look, with the exception of gold, it's all green. And gold's only down now $1.50. So that is the numbers from around the world. This meeting with Donald Trump Jr., the Russian lawyer, my goodness, will this thing never go away? I guess as long as we keep talking about it, it won't. Former spies say that Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with a Russian lawyer and a Russian-American lobbyist at Trump Tower last June looks like a textbook intelligence operation aimed at gauging the Trump campaign's interest in colluding with Moscow to undermine Hillary Clinton. Of course it does. When a music publicist representing the Russian pop star Emini Agalarov emailed Donald Trump's eldest son asking whether he would meet with a Russian government attorney who wanted to provide dirt on Clinton as part of Russia and its government's support for his father's campaign, Trump Jr. replied, "I'd love it, especially later in the summer." The 4-page email chain, which Trump Jr. forwarded to his father's campaign manager at the time, good old Paul Manafort, and to Trump's son-in-law and current senior advisor Jared Kushner, culminated in a June 9th meeting at Trump Tower with Russian lawyer Natalia, and Russian-American lobbyist. I don't even know where they make up these names. Come on, give me some vowels. Intelligence experts and former spies have said the episode bears all the hallmarks of a top-down influence operation that used cutouts and a cover story to make initial contact with the target, in this case the Trump campaign, while maintaining plausible deniability. And ultimately, experts say the campaign gave Russia a green light to move forward. Though, just more of the same. Now it's a textbook. Yes, a textbook. Cloak and dagger. So that's the news, man. The big news. We'll get some other headlines in a minute, but now we'll go to Michael, get a recap of everything that happened in the live training room today. Michael, if you're ready.
Okay.
You got a sound issue happening there.
Yeah, I'm printing something. It'll be done here in just a minute.
Gotcha.
Okay, it's done now.
All right.
Okay,
it's all yours.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, put that there. Make sure you guys can see it. Yes, you can. All right, here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 19th day of July, 2017. Today, in the live training room. Well, first, let me show you this. To take our free trial, in case you have not taken our free trial, go to the homepage at CFRN.net. And right up here at the top, a banner is going to drop down that says, sign up for the CFRN live training room, 100% free trial, use our indicators, learn our strategy. And click here. When you click there, you'll be brought to a landing page that looks like this. We just need your first name and your email address. Click on register now, and you will be sent a confirmation link. Okay. Once you click that confirmation link, and then you'll be sent everything you need to get into the live training room. All right. And that's that. Now, today was another slow day. It was slow in the fact that I had taken 11 opportunities, and only 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 of those were break even. There was very little follow through most of the morning. Okay. So today we made 1 tick on soybeans, 13 on the euro, 1 on crude. That got us to 103.75 gross. Took 105 minutes to do that, and 11 trade opportunities to do that. So on the month now, we're at 1550 over 11 days, averaging 140 per day. On the year now, we're at 20,485. That's over 133 days, averaging 154 per day. That is gross. And again, if you're going to read the spreadsheet, you got to read all the CFTC risk disclosure stuff below it. Okay. All right. So let's get into what happened or didn't happen. You see, this all looks good here in the pre-market. It all looked really nice in the pre-market. Then the markets opened up, and it was just junk right here. See, we finally got an opportunity right back here at 10:15. We shorted it once right there, and it came up and took us out of break even, and then it moved down. And that was the only opportunity that we had all day. Right now we're trading below the BBC, and we have bullish divergence, so that's indicative of the cycle reset. So I would look for it to have a big leg down. It's going to drag that cycle down and give you some more shorting opportunities. Okay. The euro. Let's see. Here we had a break even, plus 2, break even, and plus 11 right there. That was where we got our goal for the day, right here. During the break, it looks like it had a shorting opportunity right here. That would have been a break even, but it did not continue the trend. You see over here, it was trying to continue the trend right here, but it failed to. No, it did put in a higher swing. That's why we took this next one. Stop went to break even after we closed up above the MA1 right there, and then it came back and took us out of break even. We got 2 ticks out of this one. If we'd have rode it out, we could have gotten the goal for the day on that, but the rules say move the stop to break even after you get 4 ticks in profit, which we did do. 2 break evens right here. Had 4 ticks in profit on that one, but it was a momentum trade, so you move your stop to break even right away anyway. And this one also had 4 ticks in profit by the time I moved the stop to break even, and it just chopped sideways for a while. This was the only one that followed through for us this morning. Okay, crude oil. Yeah. We had crude inventories come out, and I was saying watch for crude to get trading back down into this level right here. This is when the API numbers came out yesterday. This is where it was trading at when the API numbers came out yesterday. We didn't have any trade opportunities before the inventories came out. Then the inventories came out with a larger draw than expected, which was the complete opposite of what the API numbers said yesterday. So it was a surprise to me, but I was telling everyone when it breaks through this level right here, it should have a good move down. And boy, when it broke through it, it just kept going. And it turned around, and we tried to trade it a little bit here. We missed this one. We got that one break even, got that one break even, and we got 1 tick profit on this one. Since then, no trade there. I wouldn't have done this because the cycle was flat in the middle. There was a short right here that was good for about 6 ticks, it looks like. And that's it. And that was it. The soybeans. Now the soybeans were trending nicely this morning. The problem was every trade opportunity was a momentum trade, and every trade opportunity was going into the high of the day. That was the issue over there today. Karen. Did you send it to support, Karen? Or did you send it directly to Dwayne? Okay, so right here was the one trade opportunity that we took with the soybeans. It was a bounce off the BBC, and it had closed down below the MA1 right here, so I moved the stop to +1 tick. Okay. You must have sent it directly to Dwayne, right, Karen? Because I didn't see it yesterday in the support emails. All right. During the break, it was a down close below the trend line right there. Okay. And over here, currently, there is a bounce off the BBC long trade right here. Okay. That was a bounce off the BBC long trade right there on the soybeans. All right, and that's what happened during the break. The ES was just a dog all morning in the zone right here. It had like a 3 or 4 point range in the zone all morning. So there was nothing that we could do with that. So that's that. All right. If you're gonna look at the spreadsheet, you can read all the CFTC risk disclosure stuff down at the bottom. Today is the 19th of July. You had 1 tick on soybeans, 13 ticks on the euro, 1 tick on crude. That brought us to 103.75. It took 105 minutes and 11 trades to get there. Okay. So on the month now, well, on the day we're up 103.75, and on the month, 1550. That's over 11 trading days, averaging 140 per day. On the year now, 20,485. 20,485 over 133 days, averaging 154 per day. 154 per day. Okay. Okay. If you have not taken a free trial with us, you just need to go to the home page here at CFRN. Just go to the home page, and right up here at the very top, it says sign up for the CFRN live training room trial. Use our indicators, learn our strategy. Click here. When you click there, you'll be brought to this page. You just got to put in your first name and your email address. Click on register now. When you do that, you'll be sent a confirmation link. You must click the confirmation link. Okay, if you don't click the confirmation link, you will not get the free trial. All right? And that's it. With that, I can send it back out to Studio A, fabulous Phoenix, Arizona, overlooking America's largest city park. I'm just nailing that every time now.
Yeah. Okay. And there we go.
Yep, I see your charts.
Okay. Yeah, Karen, I responded to your question in the chat box. I assume it went somewhere other than my actual inbox, where I don't know, but however I can help you, you would need to call Michael about that anyway. Call him at 949-423-6464. 949-423-6464. And I assume he would be able to send it to you right now, or answer your call right now.
Yes, if you call me right now. But I can just send her the link as well.
Okay, let's see what other headlines are happening out here in the big world today. Oh, recap of the recap was...
She's calling me right now.
All right,
11
go
trades,
no, go ahead and get it.
$105.
Yeah, go
I'm
ahead
sorry.
and get it.
Okay.
Okay. Amazon has built its own social network. Why are we not surprised? Just yesterday, they announced that they had built their own messaging network. So anything that can be built, Amazon's going to build it. They're going to call this Spark, which is an Instagram-inspired shopping feed. The service is built into Amazon's mobile app and is designed to inspire you to buy more items. Imagine that. Google has resurrected its Google Glass smart spectacles, but not for consumer use. Instead, the company's been testing a new version of the device in factories and has now launched the Google Glass Enterprise Edition. Wait to hear more from that. Uber's former top PR person is joining the mass exodus. Rachel Whetstone is headed to Facebook. Whetstone departed Uber in the middle of its crisis and starts at Facebook in September. Google Assistant is proving a dud since it launched on the iPhone. According to App Annie, the Smart Assistant has only been downloaded 300 times since it launched 2 months ago. I tried using it the other day and it pretty much did nothing. Mark Zuckerberg is an unpopular candidate for U.S. president, but not much more so than Donald Trump, who, in case you haven't heard, is the president. According to polling firm Public Policy Polling, Zuckerberg, as the Democratic candidate, would score 40% in a dead heat with Trump. The co-founder, now, you know, of course, Zuckerberg, he's out there shaking hands and kissing babies all across America, but he swears he's not going to run for office. We'll see. We shall see. I gotta believe in the 18 to 25, maybe 18 to 30 bracket, he would probably kill it. And if everybody in that age bracket came out to vote, he could be president. The co-founder of a renewable energy business acquired by Tesla is leaving only a few months after the deal. Peter Riv was co-founder and CTO at Solar City and is off to start a new venture. Amazon's meal kits went on sale yesterday and almost immediately sold out. Poor Blue Apron. Kits work out to about $8 to $10 a serving. Now remember, you still got to cook it once it gets there. It's just a kit. Apple has fired its first managing director for China as it tries to stem falling revenue and market share in the country. Isabelle Guillemot, that's her name, managed Apple's wireless technologies business for almost a decade. And you probably never heard of her. I haven't. Samsung is finally rolling out voice activation in the US for its Bixby smart assistant on the Galaxy S8. Months after the phone's launch, first came the phone, now comes the smart assistant. After initial language difficulties, Bixby can now apparently understand voice commands in US English. Well, that's good. That's really good. And hackers and governments can now see you through your phone's camera. Here's how to protect yourself. I think I can't share this with you because it's a video. Yeah, I can't. But I will get you the details and I will share it with you later in the week. Okay. Now, I want to take a look here because John's got the headset now, so I don't know when he'll pop in. And today is Wednesday, so Wayne Jett should be popping in. I don't see him as of yet. Let me look again. Look again. Okay. All right. Let's go to our good word for the day. Mental baggage. We all have some mental baggage. Do you have Samsonite, or what brand do you carry? Colossians 3:14 says, "Love ties everything completely together." If you're the kind of person who harbors grudges and holds on to past mistakes, even your own, you know what it feels like to be weighed down by mental baggage. It's hard for a relationship to survive when neither party has processed what happened in the past. Like blame, mental baggage keeps you stuck. For example, if someone in a past relationship has hurt you and you've never let go of it, every time your mate does something similar, it's likely you'll react with unwarranted fervor as if he or she was the original person who hurt you. When this happens, your mate is left feeling upset and confused by your over-the-top reaction to a minor infraction that on the surface appears insignificant. Just as you clean house to get rid of physical rubbish, you need to keep your mental, emotional, and spiritual house clean and in order. Now, how do you do that? Well, a couple of suggestions. Praying, reading, counseling, journaling, meditation, and exercise are all good ways to help ensure that past issues don't seep into your current relationships. And when they do come up from time to time, it's best to talk to the people you're in relationship with. Just be sure to do it in kindness, truth, and honesty. The old adage, love means never having to say, "I'm sorry," is wrong. A more scriptural motto for keeping mental and emotional baggage in the bin where it belongs is in Ephesians 4:26, where it says, "Don't go to bed angry." The Bible says, "Be gentle kind, meek, and patient. Put up with each other and forgive anyone who does you wrong, just as Christ has forgiven you. Love ties everything completely together. Colossians 3:12. That is our good word for the day. Mental baggage, unpack it. Get it out. Blow off the cobwebs. It's critically, the longer the relationship, the more important it is. Richard, you know, he's been really busy. Every time I talk to him, he says, let's look at tomorrow, and let's look at tomorrow. And Richard had asked about Garrett. We haven't talked to Garrett in quite a while. And so, hopefully, he'll be back really soon. It's been quite a while since we've spoken to him. Okay. Put you guys on hold for just 1 second. I'll be right back. Let me see. Yeah, I'll bring you on right now. Hey, John, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us. John, I just opened up your mic.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you. Perfect.
Great. Good morning.
God, you sound really, really good. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Well, I found a great mic and headset, so I'm glad it's really comfortable, and it's I think it has a great mic, and it has sort of sound, that feature. What is it? Sound. It's supposed to mask exterior sounds, so you want to hear all the engines going in my office. Right, search engines. Well, look, the one thing that's kind of standing out today is the metals are holding up extremely well. They don't seem to want to yield any ground at all. I mean, let's face it, we were 1204 a week ago, yes, Monday, and we're at 1241 right now, which is pretty impressive. And another thing that's going on is we call the lows on sugar recently on the show about a couple of weeks ago. We had a rally, and then we had a pullback. We got the lows on this last pullback, and now the sugar is starting to really come to life. So we've got the 3 S's kind of getting lined up here, and also the beans. We got very lucky with the beans. We managed to buy the last couple of dips very well. We bought there was a kind of a falling knife thing that happened last Thursday night, where we went down to about 990, somewhere like that, and we got back in. Literally took a shot at it just on a whim. Turned out to be the bottom, and we sold up around 1010 first time, came back to 1,000, and now it's back. And we got out again this morning and got back in. We got out around 10, 11, 12, got back in on a little bit of a break down to 109.10, and it seems to me that we're probably going to go higher now on the grains. The wheat and the corn are a little bit weak today, which means that we might. And by the way, we got into those as well, and we sold them near the highs of the day so far. But it seems like the beans are in the strongest mode today, and if the corn and the wheat start pulling back up, We've got buy stops just above the market to get back into those. Also, the cotton, we've had some very good in and out sort of scalping trades on the cotton. As a matter of fact, sold the highs, I think, late last night or early this morning around 68.40, somewhere like that. And we got back in a short while ago around 67.90. And it's starting to move higher now quite smartly, which is good. Also, the coffee has been acting, it's been edging higher. Again, it's not yielding any ground lately, which is a pretty good sign of a solid bull market. We dipped down to 134.80 this morning, and we're now back over 135. I think you just have to, if you've made good money, I mean, remember, we called the lows on this thing at 115.5 about 3 weeks ago, and 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we've had about an $8,000 move to the upside. And if you add the ins and outs, we probably could have made about $10,000 on this trade, on this run rather. But the thing is, you want to, even if you made a little bit of money, it's worth just staying long this coffee, because if a frost comes out of nowhere, and I happen to believe we're going into an ice age in the next few years, and the possibility of, I don't think the winters have been as cold in the south of the equator as they have north of the equator in the last few years, but that could change. And we haven't had a frost in Brazil for a long time. But if we get one, you will not believe what could happen to this coffee. I mean, it could go limit up for weeks, for a week or two. It's happened before. I saw coffee go from somewhere right around here to about to about $4 a pound back in the 90s. And it was really something. And another interesting thing is...
Was that due to weather?
Yeah, that was due to the frost. And it actually, it was lock limit up for about a week. And then it had a sort of a little bit of a consolidation. And then next thing you know, it is lock limit up for another 10 days or something. Just absolutely incredible. And the lumber, with the hurricane season and everything, the lumber sort of was down in the dumps for a few months, and it's really come back to life, and it's sort of approaching very high levels again. We got the lows around the 350 area on this last dip, got down to 340. I think we picked it up around 350. It's up around 388 right now. But the lumber, if we get a hurricane, usually when you get a hurricane, you get some lumber buying in anticipation, because everybody goes out and buys lumber to board up their windows. And also with the cotton, remember, one of the reasons why we went long the cotton, it was right before that huge flood in Louisiana. And actually the cotton wasn't moving. And we mentioned it on this show, it might be a good idea to go long the cotton. And we had a sort of delayed reaction all of a sudden, because what happened, we actually mentioned the harvest, which was very good, the cotton harvest, which started about a month ago. And that caused the cotton to go down actually quite a bit, because the harvest was very good. And then they had this heavy rain, and that sort of got the cotton going. And look, it hasn't been setting the world on fire, but it has been a pretty good trading market since. And so the lumber, remember Hurricane Andrew? We haven't. Hurricane was kind of a one in a century type deal, but that sent lumber limit up for like 2 weeks or something. It was really incredible when that happened. So if we get something like that happening again, you could have lumber going to all-time record highs. The cocoa has also been recovering here from a slump recently. And I would say if we get back above 2,000 on the cocoa, that would be a very, very big deal. Then we might have another run to the upside in the cocoa. The sugar is right on the high of the day right now. We got back in on the last pullback on the sugar. And as you know, I'm a big believer in the 3 S's, soybeans, sugar, and silver. And all 3 of these are lining up right now in a potentially very bullish pre-inflationary kind of mode. And and if that keeps going, then I think that our gold and silver are going to go a lot higher. Given the way gold and silver are acting right now, we're probably at a point where if we break out above 31 or so on the nugget and above 18 on the JNUG, we're probably going to have a couple of pretty big up days, and maybe some up, maybe get back to 1250, 60 on the gold, which would be really a huge. I mean, look, you can't. I mean, here we are. What is it? July? What's the date today? 19th or 20th?
19th.
19th. Okay. Always remember that July the 20th, because isn't that the day we landed on the moon? I think so.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was July 20th, 1969. That's. But anyhow, we've only got literally a week of days before the end of the month, trading days. And if we're already on a massive weekly reversal with the gold. If this turns into, and by the way, it's an incredible, we're developing an incredible buy on these golds and silver, just almost record buys. And if so, that will be cemented. If we get up to 1250 or 60 by the end of the month, you're going to have the mother of all monthly reversals on these metals. And I would expect an upward acceleration, towards 1300. And this time, I think we're going to go through 1300 like a knife through butter, when we actually break through it. I really think that we're going to get to, the measured move now on these metals is really to 1400 on the gold, and maybe even 1450. And the silver, if we get back to 18, the measured move it takes us up to 22. So, this is really going to be, and I think there's a very good chance we're going to get into the 20s in the fall, in the next quarter, and we're probably going to hit the mid 20s by the end of the year, possibly even the high 20s. Going up towards 30 could really shock people, because we are in a for the first time in decades, we're actually in a deficit situation where demand is exceeding supply, and if the bull market gets momentum going here, you could really have a situation where these, the Perth Mint and the Royal Mint and the Canadian Mint and the US Mint all sort of run out of silver. It's happened before. But when there's sort of people see when they start to see the momentum, it feeds on itself. So the demand supply scenario might not be that tight, but just the normal kind of upward momentum of a bull market could just that extra demand could be enough to send silver up quite substantially. So
how long does it take to bring these mines back online and get them producing again?
Well, that's the thing. Look, the problem with all these mines, including the gold mines, look, the big mines, some of the big mines in Australia that have been going for years are running out. The super pit is probably going to close down in the next year or two. It's running out of gold. The South African mines, they can't go any lower, because they'll be hitting the lava. It's so hot down there, when you get them down, how many miles, a mile down or something, it's 6,000, 7,000 feet, 10,000 feet, it's too hot to mine. The South African gold production has absolutely fallen off a cliff, and I think it's now starting to happen in Australia. And the fact of the matter is, the projections are that gold output is going to decline by 50% over the next 7 to 8 years, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so bullish on gold, because as this starts to, and by the way, the reserves of all these companies have already peaked about 4 or 5 years ago. So the reserves of all the majors are declining, and that's actually good for the juniors, because the only way that the majors can really get, increase their reserves is to acquire juniors that are doing the same thing. So that's probably why the juniors are going to outperform everything here in this coming bull run. And once we get, I mean, look, sentiment is, because of the way gold and silver have been going recently, the sentiment has been wound down to back to near zero. And there's very few people who, at least a week or two ago, who were bullish on gold. Maybe some of the bulls are coming back out of the woodwork, but we've got almost all the ducks are lined up perfectly for a really good bull market. And look, you can't have the markets going to new all-time record highs as we are in this juggernaut market all the time without other assets going up in price. And we've already used one measure of undervaluedness, if you like, going back to that flash crash. I mean, it's interesting how we talked about the flash crash in silver, and which supposedly went down to 1430. It turned out it was some kind of a glitch. They canceled all the trades. So, I mean, what does that tell you? If the market sort of supposedly went down to 1430, came right back up within a minute or two, right back up to 1590, and then they decided then they canceled all the trades that happened in that flash crash. That is what bottoms are made of. Bottoms tend to be made of things like that. And look, the evidence is right in front of us. The market's gone up dramatically. I mean, we went down to 1550 or so, or a little bit lower, and we 1520, I think, and we've come all the way back up. Massively. Actually, we're more than $1 higher in literally 10 days. 10 trading days, which is fantastic. It's a very, very impressive performance. And it doesn't look, I mean, look, you can never rule out there could be a retest. That's the one thing that could, that's still risky. There could be a bit of a retest on where we could suddenly see some sort of a spike down and a retest. But it may not happen, and it doesn't have to happen. Remember, we're back in a kind of a bull mode here. It's not a bear market anymore. And one of the biggest driving forces behind this this move, it's a little, it's a little bit like the 2011 flash, crash in the market from, remember, July 25th, actually, of 2011. We had this unbelievable 20% correction, which, by the way, everybody ignores. Theoretically, we had the bottom was 2009, and we have been going up for 8 years. But really, we had a kind of an interim correction of about 20%, almost 20% in the markets in that July to October 2011 crash, which was a really, really big crash. And we had a very rapid recovery off that crash. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because the short interest didn't peak, or didn't peak, if you like, at 2009. It actually peaked in 2011. So in 2011, people were theoretically more bearish on the market at that bottom in 2011 than they were in 2009, which is kind of amazing. There were more. So in other words, there were more people short the market, but that was the low. And the second, we almost got to the same level in 2015-16. That's one of the reasons why the market's so strong right now, because the short interest got, everybody went piled in back short. So as the market went higher, all those people who shorted and were wrong have to keep buying their stock back up, right? Had to keep buying. And now, as we go higher, the short interest has definitely gone down dramatically. There's no question about that today in where we are in the stock market. But guess what? Only literally a week or two ago, we reached all-time record short interest on the silver. So in other words, we're seeing a rerun in the silver of what happened in the stock market, almost, in the same time frame, 1.5 years out from the bottom in silver, there's all-time record short interest. So the silver is now higher. Although if you were short silver right now, and look at what's happening before your eyes, the market's taking off. And by the way, we went long this morning, went back long at 1240.50 a short while ago. And after being a bit short overnight, we sold it at 43 and we covered it just at 140.50 and reversed back up. And the silver is now taking off. if you're short like 1 million ounces of silver, you're losing a lot of money in the last 5 minutes. So all these people are short in record numbers, a massive short position of all time, and now the silver's gone into a supply-demand deficit. You got to have rocks in your head if you don't cover immediately. Well, guess what happened? The last 2 weeks, you've had almost record short covering by the commercials in the silver, and guess who's on the other side of the market? The people who tend to lose, who are the speculators, loaded up on the short side, because it did look pretty bearish on the chart until it turned around. Right. So this is how the world works, and as we've said on this show, it's sometimes you have to be. There are times when you can bet against the commercials, which is probably right now, and there are times when you've got to go with them. And usually when they start increasing their shorts, usually 9 times out of 10 they're going to win. Not always, but what may drive this market really, really dramatically higher is, the shorts get complacent, because let's face it, what happened was they were caught short on the big rally that happened out of the bottom in early 2016. Remember, it was such an incredible rally, biggest rally in 30 years. It was a very hard rally to catch. And I'm advocating that this next move that's just unfolding right now will be a rerun, or maybe even a bigger run than the last rally. When it really gets the upside momentum, it's going to be awe-inspiring how these gold really starts to move higher. And there's many reasons why the gold will move higher. Number one being that there's $3 trillion being pumped into the economy this year that's never ever happened before. And you cannot pump endless amounts of money into these economies without some sort of consequence at some point down the road. The hard part is we don't know how that's going to play out, but basically I think for the longer term, we've got the possibility of the dollar going down 50% in the by 2023, seven-year cycle, but topped out in the end of 16. We've got possible 50% reduction in the output of gold and silver, probably. And we've got, unbelievable, worldwide buying at a pace that's never been seen before. The elephant in the room is the Russians and the Chinese, who everybody's ignoring, who are buying massive amounts of gold every month. Russia buys almost 1 million ounces of gold every month. So the major countries need to, some like China, for its population and all that. If China bought the same amount of gold as the U.S. on a per capita basis, they have to buy, 10,000 tons or something, or no, 20, maybe 100,000 tons for the numbers.
More than what's available.
Exactly. So there's really, really, really powerful things. It's all the planets are lined up in a way that's never happened before, and not only that. Listen, the central banks, after selling gold when they should have been buying, how can you get this so wrong? They should have been buying all last decade. They were selling the gold, right? They were selling the gold to get into a weaker dollar all last decade. And then when the dollar got stronger, they started buying the gold, and that's when the gold went down. So, but the central banks have been buying gold every year in unprecedented quantities for the last 6 years or so, last 5 or 6 years. So they're obviously anticipating, what I am, which is I believe we're going to have, all of this stuff that's going on right now is fine, and everything's great for the moment, and being the juggernaut market that it is, it could keep going right through to 2020, or even possibly into the next decade. But I think the real problems are going to happen in the first 2 or 3 years of the next decade, in 2022, 23. You're going to have probably a global currency crisis. The dollar could be down 50% from where we are, or worse, and gold could be $3,000-4,000 an ounce, or possibly on its way to $8,000 an ounce, because by then we may end up with a whole new currency. They may start over with something brand new, and it might even be a global currency or something. You can't rule anything out. it could happen.
What would it take for that to happen?
A global crisis, of some incredible proportions, and that's what I think is going to happen. I mean, this is absolutely my own analysis. It's nobody else's. You heard it here first. It'll be the 100-year anniversary of the Weimar Republic, when we had 1,000,000% inflation in Germany, and I think the Western civilization currencies, that are all in deficit, pretty much the G20. They're all hooked up to the eyeballs, and they're 100 to 300% of GDP in almost every country. I mean, this is an unsustainable situation, and somehow all of this has got to get written off, and we've got to start over. And I think that's all going to come to a head in 2022, 23. And look, and that's based on the idea, if Trump gets a second term, usually when two-term presidents tend to have very good runs for 6 years, okay, and then everything goes to heck in a handbasket after that. And it happened with Reagan, the crash of '87. With Reagan, you had the Clinton. The Clinton trouble started in his sixth year. You had these tremendous corrections in the Dow, 1,000 points in a day, things like that. So, and that's going to be accompanied, I believe, by soaring gold prices. Now, listen, when gold went up to 850 ounces, $50 an ounce, the average, it didn't really affect the man in the street. It might have been an impression that the end, we were in hyperinflation and the end of the world was at hand. But, actually it was a big financial reset. And a couple of years later, it was a lead into a mega bull market that lasted 20 years. I really think the same thing will happen, in the early 20s, when we get some sort of a financial reset, and the world would then start out on the next, a next big uptrend. And it could, don't forget, there's always a geopolitical angle,
right? Which
by then, we may be we may finally have one of those days where the nuclear thing becomes a real threat or potential or actuality. Remember that part of the reason why the gold went to 850 or 875 back in 1979-80 was because of Iran and because of the fear of nukes and things back then. So
let's welcome Wayne Jett to the show, as we do this time every Wednesday. Wayne, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dwayne. Happy to be here.
What are your thoughts on this gold and silver?
Well, I didn't get to hear much of your discussion, but in regard to, I just got online, but as far as what our present circumstance is, I see it basically through the prism that the dollar, the U.S. dollar, is going to fail. Certainly, it's going to be removed as the international reserve currency. We're already seeing that reports of foreign money coming in to buy homes and various assets here. I think we'll begin to see, there will be a point in time, and I think not too far in the future, when there will be an avalanche of dollars coming back, unless there is enough action and pre-planning to prevent it from happening. It's been talked about for some time that the international dollars would be split off, that they would not be allowed to come back into the country, and that in the future they would be administered by other countries, primarily centered upon China taking charge of them, so that the people abroad who've been accepting these dollars will not be as greatly, we'll put it in kind words, as greatly devastated by the failure of the dollar as Americans will be, since it's been our government, or our Federal Reserve, I should say. It's really not our government. It is a private bank that has created this currency nightmare that we're facing that we're involved in directly, that it should be Americans who suffer primarily from the failure of the dollar. And in that circumstance, there would become two different currencies. One, the international dollar, that would be managed by China to maintain its value. The US dollar, by comparison, would be substantially devalued. And I don't see a scenario by which we avoid something like that, something in the nature of a currency reset that keeps the international dollars from coming in and requires Americans to start paying their way for anything they want from other countries, because other countries just are not going to continue to send their goods over here, whether it is food, which is presently, by the way, something like 50% of our food consumption in the U.S. Is now coming from abroad, when we once fed ourselves entirely.
And sold off the excess.
Yes. And
now, why has that changed? And John, do you see the falling dollar as part of the scenario that you were referring to earlier? John?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, why is it that we are no longer able to feed ourselves? Is that by design?
Well, I mean, we are at the moment. Look, the long-term demands on farm output is going to be a big problem. Right now, it's going okay, but it's almost like mining gold and silver. We're kind of running out of gold, and we might be running out of the ability to literally feed ourselves, at some point in the future.
Well, we still have. We have plenty of farmland, right? I mean, the government used to pay people not to grow crops.
Yeah, I personally don't think it's going to be a problem, but you never know. We might have a drought or something, or some other factor could put us into trouble. A quick update following our comments on the gold. We're starting to move up in the nugget and the JNUG, and I think this is a pretty significant breakout starting to develop here on these things. So just wanted to let everybody know about that.
Okay. So Wayne, what was it? What was it called when they used to pay farmers not to grow certain crops? What was that called?
Crop subsidies.
Crop subsidies. Yeah, that was it. And so
something of the sort. That you're right. Well, I think there is a better terminology that more specific to the point of payments for leaving land fallow, that is unplanted. There was a lot of that, and it supposedly was for the purpose of getting land or commodity prices up so that farmers could do better. And it became, of course, a sort of a welfare program of sorts, a social program, supposedly for the benefit of the public, but really to capture a so-called farm vote that made it very popular to put public money, tax money, into government farmers' pockets for not doing anything. But nevertheless, is very true, and almost surprisingly and shockingly true, that partly I think for the fact that foreign producers are lower cost producers than U.S. farmers, but we amazingly import half of our food now, and we really would be in a difficult position in the event of a substantial devaluation of the dollar, loss of reserve currency, in which you would have to buy foreign food at much increased prices to Americans. Now, that might produce additional U.S. production of food. Undoubtedly it would, But nevertheless, we have a very severe concern that we've talked about before, and you have as well, that this geoengineering that is going on is damaging, destroying crops. I think purposely so. We have floods, we have droughts, we have extreme heat, we have extreme cold, very unseasonable and unseasonable. It's my theory that I can't prove, but I think a large part of the reason for Al Gore's premonitions of tremendous impacts from climate change, so-called, or global warming as it was previously called, the kinds of severe storms and severe droughts and severe heat and severe cold and so forth, I am theorizing that I wouldn't be at all surprised that if that was softening up the public for what they knew was going to be coming to pass by the effects of geoengineering. That when they're doing the kinds of spraying of metallic aerosols into the atmosphere, stratosphere, and atmosphere, and having the kinds of severe impacts on our weather and even our climate, the natural processes of the world have been substantially affected by the kinds of so-called geoengineering that they're doing in order to, well, there are various things that they claim to be doing, shedding the light off the planet so as not to heat so much, when in effect that practice of spraying the metallic aerosols actually captures much heat from the earth and keeps it in the atmosphere rather than the contrary. So those kinds of practices are most definitely affecting crops, crop production, and so forth. Whether it's the unseasonably cold weather, severe weather that we have, the heavy flooding in areas that ordinarily wouldn't get it, the droughts in other areas that ordinarily would get more rain. Certainly California and its Central Valley is a very prime example of that. And so food is a problem. I think where I have ranged somewhat away from your initial question, but nevertheless, all of these things have to do with the kind of conditions that Americans would experience or will experience at the time that our currency has to be severely reset in relation to other currencies. It's got to be recognized. Other nations are recognizing it. The U.S. won't acknowledge it, and they try to keep others from taking action to recognize it by use of our military. But there will be a default on the U.S. debt. Whether you call, I mean, even the Keynesians that alibi for it basically explain it by simply saying, well, instead of defaulting by not paying, we'll just default by inflating our currency, which they've certainly been doing. Is this expansion of the money supply with the so-called quantitative easing. Mm-hmm. It's just mumbo jumbo for making dollars that severely depreciate the value of the U.S. dollar. All of that being hidden and masked and disguised, and people deceived by the approach of regulating or manipulating the price of gold and silver with the paper markets, paper contracts, futures, so-called, that absolutely smash the market price of those two metals every time they perk up, so that they can't actually have a fair market price for what the metal itself in your possession actually costs you. or what it's actually worth. That's going to be out of hand one day. We can't say exactly when, but I'm inclined to think sooner rather than later.
What are your thoughts, John? Are you still with us?
Well, if John's not there, I might.
He may be on a call. He's got a headset now, so he's able to. We can hear him much more clearly.
Good.
But
great.
Go ahead. What topics did you have in mind that you wanted to talk about this week, Wayne?
Well, I might just mention to you, I don't know that I've had the chance to communicate directly with you, Dwayne, but in the last few weeks I've had the pleasure of having a series of interviews with a young woman who has a YouTube website and other internet radio outlets for an audience very interested in, she calls her site Business Game Changers.
Business Game Changers?
Business Game Changers.
Okay. Is that the YouTube site, or is that the actual website?
That's her YouTube website.
Okay.
But her name is Sarah Westall, and she's been interviewing me about the causes of the Great Depression.
Okay.
She's
well, she came to the right place for that.
Actually, she is also going to interview me about the causes and orchestration of the tech crash of 2000 and the financial terrorism, so-called, of 2008. So I'm looking forward to that actually later this week, and it'll be up sometime thereafter. But she has a very interested audience in the subject, and they've been very generous in their remarks and very interested, and so I've actually had books to sell and things of that sort.
Well, good.
So
that's
I'm happy to say that, and it's given me a chance to actually get to the points of what I have tried to do with my book writing. It certainly wasn't an objective of mine to write a book, but it seemed to me to be necessary for people to have a full, comprehensive understanding of actual historical facts that are quite different from what the mainstream media and our intellectuals have passed on to us about events, particularly including the Great Depression, and the myth that the U.S. government and its officials were doing all they could, particularly after FDR was elected, Franklin Roosevelt, to alleviate suffering and to reduce and eliminate the starvation. My historical research has found and documented that quite the opposite is the case, or was the case, that the act of Franklin Roosevelt was to deceive and to deepen the Great Depression, to extend the starvation, and to make even more severe the number of deaths occurring during that debacle, and at the same time enable the ruling elite of this country, the ones who had already formed the shadow government they call the New Republic, to increase their stranglehold over the economy and their control and ownership of assets in the country, which they did very sharply in the years of the Great Depression, and they've continued to do that with a great deal of help from the Federal Reserve and the federal government. Two different entities, as we know. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned central bank that is said to be majority controlled by the Rothschild family. And, one of the things I ought to point out more often, but it's a well-known line from FDR's first inaugural speech when he was first elected to replace Hoover. The big line from his inaugural speech was the big lie of his inaugural speech. And that line was, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." It was confronting the growing view in the country that there was a cabal of ruling elite that was strangling the country, that was causing the Great Depression, and actually was an aggressive enemy of the middle class and the common people. And that by saying the only thing we have to fear is fear itself is another way for the president to have said, you guys are just a bunch of fraidy cats, and it's your own human frailty that's causing our problem here, so buck up and we'll get on through this. Now, the press has always given Roosevelt the great benefit of the doubt on that, and treated as if here's a very optimistic man who's always smiling and always joking, and it really bucks up the country and so forth and so on. But of course, his closest compatriots in his brain trust, more than one of them said that he had the skills of a professional actor and could change his persona and change his approach to things on a dime in order to present that champion of the common man approach that the mainstream media still pumps and promotes today. I would say that, I don't think I've mentioned it in our discussions before, but there's a chapter in my book called Understanding Franklin, in which I present, again, historical facts that have been reported and accepted as fact in a number of biographies, but they're always spread around and not really emphasized and that sort of thing, so that you don't bring them to the fore. But I think my chapter on Franklin Roosevelt is the most accurate and fair portrayal of who he really was as a person that any book has presented. That's the reason I devoted the coverage to it in a situation in which a writer, certainly in my case on this book, is always a matter of trying to reduce to the minimum the number of pages, the amount of writing and so forth. And it's not a matter of trying to attack a person who's a revered champion and still called by the mainstream press one of the great American presidents, the greatest one that we've had in the 20th century. How far back do we have to go to get another one like him? Much farther, all that sort of thing. And it just ain't so. And it breaks the heart to look at the things that he did to impose and deepen that Great Depression, while at the same time being given the same kind of free ride that the New York Times correspondent in the Soviet Union was giving Joseph Stalin at the same time, saying that you have to break eggs in order to make an omelet.
Right.
In other words, do destruction in order to have something better coming out. But that kind of thing, the reason I felt the book was necessary is that so long as Americans continue to believe that their government was doing all it could to alleviate their suffering and to be benevolent and to make it as good and as easy for them as possible, they're just simply not going to be able to come around to the reality of today's world and evaluate what is being done today and what our government is capable of doing to us in order to evaluate today accurately and to take action and to make their political candidate choices on the basis of that kind of judgment, on the basis of a changed worldview and a changed view of what the press is all about. It may surprise some people, but the old timers, not so much, to learn that the mainstream press actually doesn't tell the truth every time. Well, unfortunately, it is a reality that particularly since the assassination of John F. Kennedy, that our so-called dark services, our deep state, our intelligence services, as they're called, pretty much took at least indirect control of our mainstream media, with payoffs to reporters, with all kinds of relations with the media to make certain that they report only what that deep state wants emphasized to the people. And boy, are we seeing that in spades now with the most recent presidential election. Not particularly new, but it is a fact of life, and one that is, I think, seen more clearly if people understand what really was the reason for the smashing that the middle class endured and during the Great Depression. So, anyway, that's enough said about that.
What do you make of this this thing that they won't let off the front page with Trump's son-in-law and the meeting last summer with the Russian attorney? I mean, what's the real story there?
Well, just before coming on this morning, I did send you an email, which you may not have, I'm sure you wouldn't have had time to actually look into it. But it is one of the things I've been looking at lately. And I think the young woman who is being interviewed in that link that I sent you, her name is Liz Crokin. She was being interviewed from California for that particular interview, but she's, I think, been moving around. A very capable reporter and very courageous one, which these days you need to be in order to report what's going on with any prominence. And she is reporting and being interviewed about the circumstances of the very newsworthy actions being taken against human trafficking and particularly child pedophilia that is going on sharply in the United States. We're going to see more of it, of the news available to the public. The press is still, at this point, suppressing any coverage of it at all. But there are many arrests already being made in this regard. And it is not only in the United States, but Russia is doing it as well. That is the collaboration, if any, that is going on between President Trump and President Putin in terms of taking down these rings that are international in scope and incredibly pervasive in their activities, and activities of a nature that are just so morally and emotionally repugnant that it's even difficult to discuss them. But I'll refer to another discussion I saw just last night. An interview of a woman. I frankly can't tell you her name. I had not seen or heard her before, but I can recall that she identified herself as a Jewish woman, and she made that identification to be clear at the beginning of the interview that she is not one who is by any respect anti-Jewish, certainly not anti-Israeli, but that she was reporting primarily upon her knowledge of exactly what has been going on in the nation or state, whatever you want to call it, of Israel, in regard to child trafficking, human trafficking, and particularly I think they call it there more or less the same as they do here, Child Protective Services of the government.
Okay.
That is,
CPS is what do we call it in Arizona? Child Protective Services. That's on a state level.
Right. And she talks about how completely corrupt that system is, and quite the opposite of any interest in protecting the child. In fact, it is severely victimizing both children and families by the gross kind of misconduct of having an annual quota, I guess you could call it, of children that they're required to abduct and basically provide to the controlling people, whatever you want to call them, who victimize these children, not just with pedophilia, but with
now, is she reporting on this with first-hand knowledge, or?
Yes. And with organ extraction, seeing children that are abducted not only from refugees, but from families who moved to Israel. The husband is, the father is taken out of the home on some pretext. And in that circumstance, that opens the children to being taken into custody. And I mean, she was specifying, for example, that their quota required to abduct 10,000 children a year for this kind of thing. And I mean, it is. I don't mean to single that one out. It just happens that I listened to that last night. But this appears to be a practice that is so widespread that it is. It may very well be existent in every country, and seems to certainly be existent in the United States. You're well aware, I think, that CPS services in a number of states in the United States have been accused of this kind of conduct in taking children from their families, from their parents, on various pretexts, and then subjecting them to just the worst kind of consequences. I'm talking about all the way from infancy of every age. whatever they can use as a reason or excuse for depriving the parents of the care and custody of their children, they do that, and then it's well, I just can't keep on going into the circumstances, but it is horrid. And one of the things that that Liz Crokin is reporting in some detail in the link that I sent you is that Putin and Trump are certainly making a joint drive against this this satanic international rings of activity of this kind that are victimizing children and even some adults at tremendous levels. We're talking about tens of thousands, and we're talking about thousands of arrests already having been made and moving up the food chain, and predicting on the part of Liz Crokin that that major arrests in the ranks of government, federal government, both in the bureaucratic areas and also in elected offices, are going to take place, and soon, in order to not so much for the political impact, for the purpose of stopping this activity. It is not only such an evil in itself, but it is has a great deal to do with the kinds of influences that are able to be exerted on public officials in the performance of their public duties. That is, they can their votes can be controlled by people who know what they are involved in, and so there is a lot of cleaning up to do, and it's not just in the area of what is a fair debate as to what is good economic theory and what is bad economic theory, or good tax policy or bad tax policy. It goes into a lot of deep and sinister areas, and it's not an easy thing to get prepared and get ready to for the onslaught that happens when you actually start the house cleaning. But nevertheless, that's a part of what is going on, and I don't think there's any reason to believe that the kind of reactions to it will not have some effect on economic performance, market performance, governmental stability, that sort of thing. Okay, I'll stop talking for a while.
No. I'm very interested to hear what you have to say on the matter.
Well, I'm certainly ready for you to have any thoughts or questions or any other kind of direction to the conversation that you'd like.
It's just difficult for me to understand how this continues to go on.
Well, I'll tell you that I could almost put it in the way that it's difficult to understand how it could ever have occurred in the first place. Even more difficult to understand. I mean, once it gets started, the longer it goes, the worse it gets, and apparently that's been the case. But nevertheless, I mean, it is just absolutely poisonous to look at the kind of thing that apparently, by all reports that I can regard as credible, it appears to have a tremendous hold on much of what is done in our government, and that is a very sad state of affairs. We've got to get on top of things, and what will happen in that event will bear upon our economic stability and the conditions that we're going to have to put up with as we try to overcome this continuing control of our money supply, what we are required to take as payment for our goods and services is a very flawed system. It's going to produce, or it's going to come down to being exactly what it was intended to be, which is worthless paper when all is said and done. And how we get through that and past that and to some point of recovery, I think is a question of uncertainty, but one that we can do as much as the best we can to prepare for. But it's coming, and it's upon us. 100 years ago, a little bit more, they created this Federal Reserve, and the history of fiat money was then as it is now. There's never been a successful one that didn't go to zero. Interesting enough, I hear some quarters that that's not true, that fiat money is the way to go, that governments can simply manage it in such a way as to retain its value. Well, there hasn't been one to do it yet, and I doubt the dollar is going to be the first. So I think there are very difficult times coming, and one of the indications about it is certainly a subject that you and John often talk about, the gold and silver.
Right.
And my point about either of the two is that I know just enough to understand that at least each of them is a metal that has some intrinsic value. I believe that gold is more stable in value and therefore is the best measure of money's value, but silver has more supply and demand, ebbing and flowing.
Well, yeah, because it has industrial uses, and gold. Most all of the gold ever mined is still here, whether it's in the form of jewelry or whatever the case might be. Yeah. But the silver gets used up.
Yeah, it gets consumed, and therefore there's not much of it, and yet it is becoming more valuable for various kinds of technological purposes, as you well know, and everyone else, most everyone does as well. So, but not so many. Well, the people who know those things, they know that the markets are rigged too. But how the government can come on with having charged the Hunt brothers for rigging the markets back in the early 70s, and not have a red face from the embarrassment of how they're permitting the rigging now, or maybe even doing the rigging, both markets, to make it appear that the dollar is worth something, is a sight to behold. But anyway, those are items going on in my mind these days.
Right. Tell us again how, or the listeners, how they can catch your next interview with on YouTube. Is it live, or is it something that they'll come back and listen to after the fact?
They can listen to it now. It's after the fact. It's not live. The sessions are recorded. Sarah Westall is the lady who's doing it. You can search under her name on YouTube. Sarah is her first name. Westall is Westall. Sarah Westall. And she does a very good job interviewing on a number of, the type of topics that are important about public policy, and certainly about financial and business and that kind of thing. One of the interviews she did just this last weekend, I had the opportunity to hear of another guest she had. I can't recall the lady's name who was the subject of the interview, but she was a very capable and good spokesman. She was born in Haiti. She was raised in the United States. She is now a practicing lawyer, I believe, in New York City. And she was relating the historical treatment of Haiti by the United States and others, how the U.S. government had deposed on 2 different occasions the first democratically elected president of Haiti in history. That would be Aristide. One actually elected by the people because he was interested in furthering the peoples of Haiti's interests, as opposed to the imperialist interests of those outside the country who wanted to keep them essentially slaves and making profits for others. A very interesting interview, and another courageous one as well. Because those same interests are certainly involved today. You're probably aware that another Haitian, a man who was scheduled to testify of what he knew of the Clinton Foundation's conduct in collecting charitable contributions from the American public, and indeed worldwide, for Haitian relief after the earthquake of the giant earthquake that practically destroyed the country, and in effect the fraud that occurred with the failure of the Clinton Foundation to provide those collected funds for Haitians' benefits. That man was found dead in his hotel room just a short time before he was to testify on that subject to Congress, if not to a grand jury. Shot to death supposedly by his own hand, a suicide in his hotel room in Palm Beach or something, and not Palm Beach, but South Florida near Miami. And more than one such person has died just in the last couple of weeks. So there we are. Time after time we get to those kind of things that are affecting, I do think they affect our economy. I do think they have to do with, a lot to do with what we'll be anticipating in the markets. They don't come up easily on the profit and loss statement or the balance sheet of big companies, but nevertheless, they certainly affect our politics.
Yes, yes, they do.
I think the geoengineering effects that we mentioned earlier certainly are becoming more severe, but they continue to be practiced. They haven't stopped with the new administration, as many were hoping, but hope still exists that perhaps we can turn it about, but it needs to be done soon. It's a very urgent problem in that area as well. You may have some other issues that you'd like to bring up.
No, nothing else really on my radar. I'll tell you, I've kind of taken a break from the news as of late. It got to be so overwhelming with so much.
It's true, and it's certainly natural to want to get away from it. We wish it weren't so, but I know I bring it up and insist on talking about it. But nevertheless, the rest of it, the approach to looking at economics or the markets without considering these things that affect it so drastically, I can't bring myself to understand economics as being worth anything with that kind of a censor on it. And so I have to bring up that kind of thing. It looks to me as if, though, that in terms of tax cuts, that there's a substantial push on to go ahead and enact tax cuts. I see no reason why they can't be enacted and enacted quickly. I think you may have noticed earlier this week that there was a joint opinion piece published by several of the what you'd call more or less supply side economist views. One of them Arthur Laffer, another of them Steve Forbes, and a couple more, in which they said that there are three major aspects of a tax cut that ought to be done right away, and they can be done because there's support for them in both parties. And so they ought to get those done and make it clean and fast, and they can do so even under the rule requiring only 51 votes, the so-called reconciliation rule in the U.S. Senate. If they put a time limit on it, and they can put a time limit, say, of 10 or 15 years on that tax cut, and that would be plenty to get us past this current crisis. But unless they do this promptly, before they get into all of the quagmire of expanding the debt limit and things of that sort that the time is running out on, they need the tax cut out of the way, then they can deal with the other things and go on from there. But they also say that they by no means should they observe this so-called Senate rule that any change of the tax code must be revenue neutral. That is, they must be able to account for as many tax increases as tax cuts if they're going to change the tax code. So we'll see whether they're able to move on that. I'm inclined to think that President Trump will want to do that, and will push it that way. And we'll see whether either of the leaders of the two houses can produce for him. Okay. Well, I think we're just about to the end of our hour.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Appreciate it. Always interesting to hear your thoughts, ideas, your point of view, and hope you have a good week as summer winds its way down here, and we look forward to talking with you next Wednesday.
All right. Thanks for having me, Dwayne, and you and John have a good day.
Okay.
Goodbye.
All right. You take care. And that's... John, are you still there? I thought you logged off. I still see an open mic. Okay. All right, guys. That is going to do it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Whoever you are, wherever you are, May God continue to richly bless you with His mercy and with His grace. And I'll see you at the bell.
Remember this, there is no greater return on investment than to see a human life changed and given hope. As always, pray hard and trade safe. Any financial information discussed on this show is simply the opinion of our host, Dwayne Reeves, his co-hosts, and guests. To learn more about trading Emini Futures or to take a 1-week free trial in our live trading room, call 1-866-928-3310. 866-928-3310. Information discussed on this radio program should not be construed as a recommendation to buy or sell any security. Always do your own due diligence and consult with a licensed securities broker or financial planner before making any investment decision.